This is an emergency broadcast from the BBC in London. The world have been struck blind, but there is a bigger threat to us at this time. Mason, what do people need to know about the Triffids?
They're extremely dangerous.
Sometime during the late 1970s, a woman is dragging herself through the middle of a jungle. She is in a terrible state. She's been studying the incredibly vicious plants called Triffids and has become a victim of their brutality. With her last breath, she manages to warn her son so that he can get away safely. 30 years later, Triffids are now kept in factories, and their oil is used as fuel as an alternative to fossil fuel. This process has saved the planet from global warming. Oil companies are keeping the general population in the dark about this advancement because the Triffids are incredibly dangerous. They feed on people and possess venomous branches that can blind a person with just one strike. All the factories have special security personnel assigned to make sure that the Triffids are never left unattended. Furthermore, whenever a scientist has to study a Triffid, they must wear protective goggles and be accompanied by a guard who carries a taser to keep the Triffids at bay. One of the scientists who studies Triffids is a man named Bill Mason. He is the son of the woman who died in the jungle in the flashback. He wants to carry on the scientific work that his mother was doing with the plants, in which she insinuated that the plants are much smarter than they appear, and that the noises they make are actually intelligent communications. He records the noises for his work. Bill has constant nightmares about his mother's death, and in the dreams, he also sees natives of the jungles wearing mysterious masks approaching him. One day, Bill is making scientific observations with the Triffids accompanied by a guard named Lucy, when a man named Walter sneaks into the lab. Walter is an anti-Triffid fuel activist and wants to reveal the truth about the plants to the entire world. He attacks Lucy from behind and makes her lose her protective goggles. Bill arrives and gives Lucy his own goggles before grabbing her taser and neutralizing Walter. This commotion draws the attention of the Triffids, and one of them ends up attacking Bill in the eyes. While the remaining guards deal with Walter, Lucy quickly rushes Bill to the hospital where a doctor gives him an anti-venom and bandages his eyes, unable to say with conviction if this will work or not. He says that they will know for sure in 24 hours. During this time, the entire world is getting ready to witness a once-in-a-generation event, a massive solar eruption. The people of Earth have been informed that while this is a spectacular event, it will not harm humans. However, when the eruption begins, it turns out to be much stronger and brighter than anticipated. It knocks out most human technology, and anyone who looks at it directly feels a strong burning sensation in their eyes. Bill spends the entire night with his eyes bandaged, so he has no idea what is going on. When he wakes up in the morning and removes his bandages, he learns that he can still see. However, as he steps out of his room, he finds that everyone is panicking. He goes to his doctor and learns the shocking truth. Witnessing the solar eruption has left nearly the entire world completely blind. Bill immediately heads back to the lab, panicking about what might be happening now that the Triffids are not being monitored by any security personnel. On the way, he discovers that the entire world has devolved into complete and utter chaos. A flashback reveals that when the solar eruption happened, Walter noticed that the light in the sky is much brighter than it is supposed to be, and he covered his face to protect himself. Everyone else at the lab, including Lucy, went completely blind. Walter took advantage of the situation to sneak into the lab and free the Triffids. Another flashback shows that a man named Torrance was on a plane when the solar eruption happened. He did not care for it and went to sleep with an eye mask on, while the rest of the passengers eagerly looked out of their windows to see the eruption. Everyone on the plane, including the pilot, went blind and started panicking. Realizing that the plane was going to crash, Torrance locked himself in the bathroom and inflated 100 life vests. By the power of plot convenience, this ridiculous technique worked, and he survived the plane crash. He gets out of the plane and immediately establishes himself as a villain by taking advantage of the chaos and robbing stores. A woman named Jo wakes up with her eyesight intact because she was in an underground subway when the flare happened. The subway is now in ruins due to the plane crash. Jo comes out, and when the people around her learn that she can see, they desperately try to use her to find their way. A mob of people surrounds her, and one blind cop even tries to arrest her with some phony excuse so that he can take her with him. Just then, Bill arrives and he rescues Joe from the mob. The two get away by being quiet so that the mob can't differentiate them from the crowd. Next, Joe and Bill walk all the way to the White Hall and find its entrance blocked by a large crowd of blind people. They try to talk to the security personnel there, but they are also blind and only answer with violence. With no authority figures to turn to, Bill decides to head to the lab himself, and Joe joins him because she does not want to be alone. At the lab, Bill discovers that the Triffids have escaped, and both Lucy and Walter are dead. He grabs all his scientific data in the hopes that it might come in handy in dealing with this crisis. Next, Bill agrees to drive Joe to her father's house, but when they arrive there, they discover that he has already been killed by the Triffids and is being dragged away. Joe loses it and tries to shoot the plants, but Bill drags her away before they get surrounded. Having learned how dangerous the Triffids are, Joe decides to help Bill in warning people about them. The two arrive in London and use the BBC emergency radio broadcast to warn everyone. They tell people that the Triffids eat humans and they'll be heading toward major cities to find food. After the broadcast, the two spend some time bonding. Bill tells Joe about his childhood. He reveals that his father was the one who first discovered that by genetically modifying Triffids, they can produce an oil that would replace fossil fuels and solve the energy crisis. His mother did not approve of this research. He reveals that his mother died and he hasn't seen his father since. On the other hand, Torrance arrives at the Prime Minister's house, where he is greeted by his blind secretary, Hilda. Hilda tells him that there are no authority figures left anymore, and Torrance decides that he will take advantage of this situation to seize power. Next, Bill sees flares going off in the night sky and assumes that these are signals from other people who can still see. As Bill and Joe head toward the source of the flares, they run into Torrance, who is stealing weaponry from a military vehicle that was attacked by the Triffids. He suggests a team-up with the two, but they don't dig his vibe and turn down his offer. Next, the two arrive at the source of the flare and discover a building occupied by the employees of the Home Office, military, and other organizations who can still see. Blind people are not allowed to enter the building. Bill warns them about the Triffids, but they say that they have more pressing concerns like gathering supplies and finding a place for all the people who can still see to live in. They don't want to take the blind people with them, because it would be impossible to take care of them. Joe thinks that this is highly immoral and refuses to be a part of it. Meanwhile, Bill prepares to head out to find his father and solve the Triffid crisis. Joe wants to join him, but he's not so sure that it is a good idea. Next, a man named Major Coker, which is a hilarious name by the way, works with a group of sighted people to take care of the blind. Torrance offers to join the group and buys his way in by giving them the weapons he has collected. Coker and his group use the weapons to invade the building of the Home Office and kidnap all the sighted people in there, including Joe and Bill. Coker handcuffs each sighted person with a blind person, forcing them to take care of the blind. Bill is handcuffed to an old mechanic, while Joe ends up with Hilda. Bill tells Coker that his heart is in the right place, but it would be unwise for him to ignore the Triffid threat. Next, they all arrive in London to look for supplies. As they take a break during this process, Torrance speaks with Joe and lies that Coker wants her to start a new radio broadcast and help enlist more people for their cause. Joe says that she does not approve of these methods and will not become a part of it. The group finds a supermarket warehouse with plenty of food for everyone but gets attacked by Triffids there. Bill saves Joe from one by setting it on fire using a lighter and spray, but many other people become casualties, including Hilda. After this incident, Coker takes the threat of the Triffids seriously and uncuffs the remaining people. He asks Torrance for more weapons to fight the Triffids and assigns Bill as his right-hand man. Torrance is not happy about this, but he plays along. Joe sees the change in Coker's behavior and tells Torrance that she will do the broadcast to bring more people in, but after that, she is leaving with Bill to find his father. Torrance doesn't really want her to leave, so he immediately sets the broadcast up and puts her to work. People all over the city gravitate toward her and arrive to join the cause. While Joe is busy, Torrance sends his men to kidnap Bill and Coker. He has his men take the two to the forest so he can make their deaths look like Triffid attacks and take over the leadership of the group. Torrance tells Joe that Bill has been killed in a Triffid attack and gives her his things as proof. Meanwhile, in the forest, Torrance's men make noises to attract Triffids toward Bill and Coker, but the plants arrive much faster than expected. The men are killed while Bill and Coker escape. During their escape attempt, Coker's eyes get sprayed with the Triffid venom, while Bill loses his recording device after he uses the recorded Triffid noises to distract the plants. The two men drive until the car runs out of gas and start looking for shelter. Joe continues to broadcast, and people from all over the country arrive to join the cause. Torrance makes a move on Joe, saying that they need to have moments of happiness in these dark times. Classic let's make love because the world is ending pervert argument. She turns him down. Next, Joe notices that people are building a wall around the area for protection against the Triffids. She gets suspicious that this is supposed to be Coker's operation, yet everyone follows Torrance. She asks a young soldier named Troy if Bill really is dead, and he admits that they don't have definitive proof of that. They just have Bill's recorder, which some soldiers brought back from the forest. Joe sneaks into Torrance's office and steals the recorder. Bill and Coker arrive at a church where they receive help. The church is led by Mother Durant, who explains that all refugees are welcome here, and also that the church is safe from Triffids. Bill doesn't understand how that can be, and Mother Durant simply says that it is the protection of the Lord. Next, Coker decides to stay at the church, but Bill leaves to look for his father. On his way, he learns a terrible truth. The church is not protected by the Lord. Durant has been offering people as sacrifices to the Triffids so that they'd leave the church alone. Bill returns and tells the people of the church the truth. They kick Durant out and choose Coker as their new leader. Bill leaves him there. Joe agrees to go to dinner with Torrance to throw him off her scent, but while he prepares for the date, she makes a broadcast, telling people not to join the cause because Torrance just wants them to die for him. Torrance is enraged and sends his men after her. Troy spots her hiding, but he doesn't tell the others, and she manages to escape. In a city full of Triffids, she finally finds a working car and exits London. She heads for the place where Bill told her he grew up. On the way, she accidentally crashes her car and continues on foot. A mysterious van arrives and a man with a gun steps out of it and captures her. Next, Bill arrives at a town that has been abandoned post a Triffid attack. The only two survivors are two young sisters named Susan and Imogen, who almost shoot Bill. Susan doesn't trust Bill, but Imogen agrees to give him the family car if he takes them with him. After driving for a little while, they come across another car, and in the mother of all plot conveniences, the driver of that car is Bill's father, Dr. Mason. Their reunion is not exactly a happy one. Bill and the girls follow Mason to his place, which is surrounded by electrical fences to protect from Triffids. Mason turns out to be the guy who captured Jojo, gives Bill all of his belongings, and the two proceed to make love. Next, Mason tells Bill that he has a plan to stop the Triffids. They just need to genetically engineer a new kind of Triffid that sterilizes other Triffids instead of fertilizing them. When they release this new species into the wild, it will eventually lead to the entire race dying out. Mason says that he is already working with a female Triffid, but he needs a male Triffid's pollen to complete his work, and Bill promises to bring him one. Imogen is starting to refer to Bill and Joe as Mom and Dad, and it is frustrating Susan. Meanwhile, Bill arms himself and arrives at the lab to see if there is a live Triffid still there. He plays the Triffid noises to attract one, but ends up finding Susan instead, who snuck into his car to join him on this mission. A Triffid arrives and grabs her, and Bill cannot shoot it because he's worried about shooting her by accident. He instead jumps on the Triffid and beats it to death. The two bring the Triffid head back to Mason, and he begins his work. Bill has another dream about the day his mother died, and Mason shows him his mother's old belongings, which include a black mask similar to the one in his dream. That night, Triffids all over the world start sporing, and Torrance sends Troy to the lab to grab Bill's findings to see if he can find a solution to the Triffid problem. The next day, a plane flies over the house, dropping pamphlets that explain that a survivor colony has been established in the Isle of Wight. Bill and the others decide to go there after Mason is done with his work. Mason listens to his wife's old recording while feeding the Triffids, but the recordings include Triffid noises, which seem to enrage the plant. It attacks Mason through the hatch. Bill arrives and shoots the plant, but he is too late to save his father. He gives Mason a proper send-off. Next, Bill tells Joe that he has killed the mutated female Triffid, and he doesn't have the time or the resources to restart his father's work. The two agree to head for the Isle of Wight. The next morning, the two discover that Torrance has broken into their home and taken Susan and Imogen hostage. He says that if Bill wants them unharmed, he must come up with a solution to the Triffid problem within 24 hours. As Bill, Joe, and the girls are locked up, Bill contemplates for hours but is unable to come up with a solution. He says that their only option is to find a way to escape. He comes up with a plan. He says that he'll attract the Triffids with the recordings, and while they attack Torrance and his men, they'll escape. Torrance asks to meet Bill, and Bill leaves the recorder with Joe, who sneaks out and hides it while keeping it playing. At night, the Triffids arrive with no fear because Torrance has turned off the electrical fence. Torrance heads outside to fight the plants and gives Troy the order to kill Bill and his family. Troy arrives in the room, but can't bring himself to do it. He instead decides to help Bill and his family escape. When the Triffids are close enough to be electrocuted, Torrance gives the order to turn on the fence. Troy lies that something is wrong with the switches, leading to several men being killed. Torrance comes inside the house and sees Troy trying to escape with the family. He shoots Troy, but Bill tases him. This commotion has given the Triffids the time to surround the house. Bill's flashback gets triggered during all this, and he finally remembers what the black masks are for. If you pour Triffid venom in your eye through the mask, you don't go blind, but the plants think you're one of them. He has already done this before once as a kid to escape when his mother couldn't. He performs this procedure on himself, the girls, and Joe, and it works. They walk out between the vicious plants without getting attacked. Torrance tries to follow them, but the plants rip him to shreds. Next, Bill, Joe, Susan, and Imogen are all heading toward the survivor colony, where Bill is determined to complete his father's experiment and rid the world of Triffids once and for all. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.